It's a cold day in Texas today and my radiator's leaking. So I'm going to change it. And if you've got a 90s Suburban pickup truck or Tahoe, this is how you change it. Look out! Okay, the reason why you'd want to be changing out your radiator is coolant leaks, obviously. If you've got your temperature gauge going up and you've checked all your hoses, made sure they're good, you have checked your thermostat or changed your thermostat basically, and checked your cooling fans. Cooling fans have to be coming on. That's definitely something that will cause overheating, especially in traffic conditions or idling. Check your fuses, check your relays, check your wiring. Last thing you do is change the radiator. Now if you're like when I bought this thing, I opened up the radiator cap and it was just red sludge. That's bad. So if you've got a condition like that, then you should change your radiator, and that's the reason why I did swap out the radiator from my other Suburban previously, because that was so disgusting. Here is the new radiator. There are a lot of radiators that are available online on eBay, some of them as low as $78. I chose to go with AutoZone for $133. You get what you pay for comes to mind in that scenario. So let's see what we got. Right away, this looks very nice actually. It's a 2-core radiator. It's not even a 2-core. It's a single core with some very wide fins. It's a radiator. Okay, the reason why I'm replacing this radiator is I have previously determined that this guy, after seeing leaks down on the ground for days, I've probably lost most of the coolant and determined that I've got a leak on this side of the radiator right at the joint where the plastic meets the aluminum, and that is typical. I have already tightened up my clamps. She's coming out. The first thing I'm going to do is drain the radiator, and that is this guy right here. It's in the same location on the radiator in the truck too. Petcock. Taking the radiator cap off will help with the radiator draining quicker. While that's draining, I like to go ahead and use my 10mm socket to get the cover off the fan shroud. There's 3 bolts up at the top and 2 bolts down on the side, all 10mm. Okay, so we're removing the top shroud. We're taking out 10mm bolts. There's 3 in the top, 2 on this side, 2 down on this side. You also have this cable here that runs from the battery over to the ECU, and that's just a clip. And that comes out and gets pushed out of the way. And out she comes. The bottom half of the shroud, you don't have to take it out. Just make sure it's clear of the radiator so the radiator can be pulled straight up. Now we've got 2 bolts for the upper radiator mounts. They're not really mounts, just basically a rubber isolator and a bracket. That's all it is. This is a great time to go ahead and inspect your hoses and your clamps and anything else in here that you can't normally see when all of this is together. Okay, with the shroud off, the coolant draining, you can go ahead. The only other step is to take everything off that's connected to the radiator, which is all hoses. If you've got one that's got some kind of a electronic sensor in it, you'll need to disconnect that. But thank goodness you don't have to take anything off on the front of the vehicle, like some German cars I've seen recently, which I would never own, by the way. So there's a coolant overflow hose here. It just slides off. Try and keep track of what you're taking off, because all of that will have to go back on. The fittings on the passenger side on this radiator for the coolant lines are 1/2 inch. When I work on my car, I prefer Husky tools. Depending on where you are in the United States as far as rust and what kind of condition your vehicle's in, these may or may not come out easily. I maintain my vehicles pretty well, so this is coming apart pretty easy. Okay, well, that's lost. Oh, that's loose. As far as doing this by your manual, it's probably going to tell you to disconnect the negative side of your battery. I would recommend that. And you're going to lose a little bit of transmission fluid. That is to be expected, but not a big deal. You're not losing clamps, or sorry, these other lines over here are 3/4 inch. Top and bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and seal up my petcock, and then move my drain pan over to the other side and take the lower radiator hose off. I'm sure there'll be some more coolant comes out down there. Okay, the petcock is shut off. The drain pan is moved, the petcock is closed. I'm going to go ahead and finish taking off these lines over here, and then take the lower radiator hose off, as well as the upper radiator hose. Okay, back to the lower radiator hose. Comes off very easy, and as I suspected, tons of coolant. This lower radiator hose feels really soft, so I'm going to go ahead and replace that. Not today, but I'm going to go ahead and replace it at some point here in the near future. Okay, I got everything disconnected. This guy should just lift straight out. It's a shame this one was leaking, because this is a heavy duty, very wide core radiator. I'll show you the difference. This is the new radiator. that's supposed to go with the truck. And you can see, this is what came with it. This one was in a Suburban I used to have years ago, and I kept it because how thick it was. But it's leaking on the side, so that's not gonna work. And this is where this guy's leaking, right along the side here, which is a shame. But that's what you get with radiators with plastic tanks. Okay, installation is literally the reverse of removal. So if you can figure out how to take these out, you can sure figure out how to get them back in. Just got to make sure you have clearance from all your hoses so that this guy can slide right back down in there. Could end up with a bunch of leaves down in between this and your AC condenser. Now's the time to get it out. Alright, just going back in. You definitely want to make sure you don't damage any of these fins. They make a tool for straightening them out, which I don't own, and these all look good. I got one little thing right there. It'll be okay, but hopefully this will do just as good a job as the other one is at keeping this engine cool, keeping it from overheating. There's a couple rubber pads down at the bottom that this sits on, just like the ones at the top. If they're missing, you should replace them. Okay, now I'm going to work from the bottom up, which is going to be the lower radiator hose on this side, and then the hoses on this side, working from bottom up. And then over this side, I'll do the oil cooler hoses from the bottom up, and then the radiator hose at the top. And making sure your petcock is closed before you refill. Very important. Otherwise, you'll end up with a mess that I may or may not have done sometime. So I'm not going to take you through the installation of this guy. It's just reverse of removal. If you want, you can play the video backwards. It's a good idea to clock your radiator hoses while you're doing that, so that if you have to ever do this again, or if you have to change your radiator hose, you'll be able to get to that hose clamp easily if you can put it in a position to allow more access. Also, after you get everything connected and you're sure everything's tight, your hose clamps are on tight, and your fittings are in for your transmission cooler and your oil cooler, then you'll want to put in your coolant, check for leaks. You will have to burp the cooling system when you're done with this, just to make sure you get all the air out of it, so make sure you do that. And if your Haynes manual or whichever manual you're using says to disconnect the negative side of the battery first, I'd go ahead and do that. I didn't on this time. Sometimes it's not really necessary, other times it is. But it's always a good idea. Okay, the same general rules apply when you're installing the fittings into the radiator fittings. When you're screwing them in, make sure you don't cross thread them. If there's some kind of issue and you're getting some resistance, stop, back it off, try and find out what's going on, try and get it lined up right. Because if you don't and you ruin the threads, you're going to be having a leak forever, or you're going to be pulling this out and taking it back. Don't forget to put your brackets back on, along with your rubber mounts. Okay, the reasons why I like this Suburban is it can haul anything. It's basically a truck. It's a really nice truck. And back in '99, this thing was probably $35,000, $40,000, and now you can get them for $1,500 or less for halfway decent ones. But parts are readily available, they're cheap, and they normally don't break down. If you maintain this truck, it'll just keep going and going and going. Even if you've got to put another Vortec 350 in it, you're looking at $1,500, and if you can do the work yourself, that's all there is. If you got to pay somebody to do it, it's probably another $1,500 to do that. But for $3,000, you've got a truck with a new engine in it. And this one is on its second transmission, from what I understand. That's a weak point with these. But if you can get 100,000 miles out of a transmission, you're probably not okay. You ought to get more than 100,000 miles. But this one had it changed out at 100,000, and it's got 167,000 on it now, so I'm anticipating I'm probably gonna have to change transmission here in another 20,000 miles or so. We'll see. Anyway, I love this truck. Check out the playlist, which is all about this, and make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and subscribe. Now I'm going to get back to work putting this guy back together. Hey, one more thing. I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and for the people who follow me on Facebook and Instagram, especially my friends in Australia. Take notice. I am paying attention, and I appreciate you guys, as well as my friends in Egypt and India. Thanks.
Coming up next on Jay Hunter's Garage, burping the coolant system.
Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and take care of your cars, people. Also, there was another thing I was going to say. What was that?